All right, folks, we are back. Welcome on back here live this Tuesday morning, shortly after 11 o'clock Eastern, November 7th, for all of us here, at least on recording. But great to have all of us back here live. Barbara, Roger, Jeff, great to see all of us there. Phil, Lee, Brian, as well, inside our live trading room. Anna and Brad, who had just crushed it earlier today. Brad and one of our longtime students of CTU. He killed it earlier with us, but great to have all of us here collectively here on social media as well. Hey, if you're not subscribed yet, be a friend, tell a friend. Make sure that you're subscribed right to @CyberTradingU on all of our social media platforms at Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, etc. Hey, we have had a phenomenal week so far. Yesterday, a little bit of chop, but today the SPY broke out once again. So with that, we've had a really strong run up on a bunch of trades from last week. DraftKings being one of them, AMD being another one of them, and a few more otherwise, but we'll get to those in just a moment. Obviously, we have to talk about the big movers that we had from today, let alone yesterday. I probably got 4 or 5 separate emails about LIFW. Hey, Josh, can you go over LIFW for me? Absolutely. Give me a quick second here. Make sure I'm good to go. Just across the market, get my level 4 up and running, and we will be off and set right away just to talk about the big runner from yesterday. It was up 400%, I think, at one point, this LIFW. Now, hey, full transparency. I always shoot straight here. Myself, old Josh here, I didn't take a single trade on this stock yesterday. Not one. Not because I was like, oh, it's too volatile. Yeah, at some point it became too volatile. So eventually you just say, all right, the hell with it, let it run. But even in the morning, like as a trader, you could only focus on so much at one time. When you're watching TV, are you watching one show or are you watching 6 shows at the same time? Right? You tell me. So, if you're a smart aleck here and trying to answer, you watch 6 shows, then hey, let me quiz you on all 6 of those shows and see how well you remember every little, quote conversation, right? So it's to tell you here, yesterday morning, we had this on our watch list, rightfully so. It was up and moving up heading into the open. That's why Fausto put it on the list to begin. But of course, from yesterday, we still had DraftKings, AMD, Tesla was moving really well. So there was a bunch on the table that we could have focused on right away at 9:30. So myself, I did not buckle in on this trade right at 9:30 yesterday, and obviously it ended up leading to a hell of a pop shortly afterwards. So let's blow this chart up here a little bit, and we'll kind of get right to it. Again, this was on our list. It's not like this stock like just popped out of nowhere. It's not like, we called it out when it was up 300% already. Go back to yesterday morning's watch list. It was on there. Fausto put it on. Let me ask us really quick. Hey, simple question, folks. We know it's up percentage wise here, but what's the trend of this stock from 9 o'clock? Is the trend of this stock up or is the trend of this stock down? It's a simple question, right? So Brad right away, quick to the punch, saying up, and Rod saying up as well. Of course, when a stock is trending up, folks, what color are we seeing on the time and sales? What color comes up more often than not? We do this each and every week here, right? But it's because this is our strategy. This is how we, on a simplistic level, follow volume, right? So, hey, for students that have been with me for a little while now, Rod, Phil, Brad, all saying green. All right, gents, and all of us here otherwise. What's the nickname that we give for green? What's the nickname we give for green when a stock is trending up? Roger says, not your cup color. Yeah, I got obviously working from home now, and I got my home office here. So I grabbed a nice little plastic Solo cup. It's not what you think is in there. It's water. I'm teasing, of course. No, but of course, Roger is absolutely correct. Not the color of my cup, right? It is green, and we nickname green as buying. So that's where we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, for this stock that is not just up percentage-wise and not just trending up, but for this stock that we saw likely some buying yesterday morning, where and at what price did we see all of that happen? Give me a split sec. I think I even need to go back on my book map here, load up a little more data. I took it off my book map last night, so I got to load up a little extra juice here on my heat map. Give me a split second here. It's just loading up here, I believe. And if not, then we'll be able to just do it right off the chart. But let's see. Is it going to give it to me here? It might not give me what I want right now. I'm trying to load up more data from at least before 10:25 yesterday. That's as much as up. There we go. There we go. Yeah, we're loading. All right. So I think that we got it here. Did we? No? Oh, come on. All right, so unfortunately, Bookmap is playing hard to get for me here. Now, the question is, though, where did we get that volume filled? Well, let's look at our volume bars here. And you could see at least a pretty large green spike. At the time, 9:09 in the morning. All right, well, you know what? We don't have Bookmap for this one here, but let's go right back to the old tape. Let's actually do this the old-fashioned way, folks. Go right back to yesterday morning at 9:08, 9:09 Eastern time, and I'll show you what happened. We'll take a look to see where the volume got filled, if any. You know, it's not a whole lot of volume, mind you, but, you know, going into 9 o'clock, 9:30 yesterday, stock ended up making a small pop, and it looks like, for what it's worth, it's not big. I don't count this as like, you know, institutional trading, but, you know, at 323, it's like your only larger block print that gets filled, like over 1,000. So afterwards, it's still shaking around it. That's where you could probably raise this up a little bit and focus more on just the regular chart level here. Seemingly, it is right around 326. Maybe you can go even a penny up, 327. Generally, after this pop and drop, it was holding pretty well under that one price. So that's where you could say, hey, when the market opens up at 9:30, what if this breaks over this price level and we see more buying, we see more green coming in? Easy to say, but it broke over, it ran up right away, and that's what really started this whole run, right? All right, well, if you missed it from there, let's say if you had missed it from that 320-ish, 325 price, again, I go through the same questions for a lot of us here each and every week because you can't reinvent the wheel, folks. You know, we go into this a lot further, expanded throughout our curriculum here at Cyber Trading University. But it's the same motions here every time, right? It's like when you look to build a piece of furniture, you go to IKEA or wherever you get it from, you know, it comes with a list of instructions if you're going to assemble it yourself. You got to go through the same motions in order to get the product that you're looking for. So here, let me ask Brad, Brian, Margaret, Eric, Phil, and all of us in the chat, hey, just expectedly so, where are we most often to see these big iceberg orders out there? You know, I don't have the book map going until 10:15, 10:30 from yesterday. So I'm not going to be able to show you what happens here. But because of that, that's where I could at least ask you, you know, where are we most likely to find these big iceberg levels out here? Oh, you know what's missing? I forgot to turn one light on here. It looks like I'm in a dungeon, right? I ended up actually fixing all my lighting here. I forgot to turn one on right there. It's making the whole home office dim here right now. So I'll change that for this afternoon, I see. So, hey, Barbara, who I just chatted with earlier, had a great call before, and Rod and Wendy and Elite, you know, and Sydney and all of us, 50-cent levels, whole numbers. So that's where you could say, oh, 350. That's where you could say, all right, well, after that is $4, right? Well, what happened at those prices? Well, it was holding under it here pretty damn nicely. And really on the first test and break above the level, seemingly it was that strong to where it just instantly broke over, ran up right away. Now, this is where I could tell you. And same thing that we talk about each and every week here in Traders Talk. It's that you can't expect a stock to move up perfectly across the whole morning, across the whole day. I'm not even talking in terms of percentage. Like, yes, this moved up to $18, believe it or not. But it obviously pulled back. It obviously fell into consolidation and a bunch of shakes, at least over time. The more and more a stock is already running up, just like this year, you can't expect what we had happen here. We can't expect that to happen at every next resistance, for it to just seemingly break above it the first test and for it to run. I mean, you hear it from me each and every week, folks. If you're inside our live trading room, at least, the first test of a big level is the strongest test. It's the best test. So yeah, this was actually pretty surprising here, where it blasts right above this level. I mean, maybe that's because the 325, 326 was stronger. Well, hey, you still can't expect just a break above a big level, the first test, every level. So hey, before it broke over 4 and cleared above it, the first couple of tests above the level, it popped and dropped. But then the more times that we see a stock, you know, needle and nip and gnaw and break through that ceiling and go through it, it's going to eventually make that more decisive move. You know, like when you hear me say, oh, it's going to go through it, I'm talking about these shakes. The more it does these shakes here in a shorter concentration, we're going to likely see our more decisive, conclusive move out of this level. Now, when I say that, obviously we hope for the move up, right? And by following trend and just like we teach here, breaking through a big level on the way up, well, you're putting yourself you're going with the momentum. You're putting yourself in a position where as long as you set a tight stop and playing tight defense, you're doing the right things. So, of course, that means that it's not foolproof, 100% win-loss ratio. We take losses all the time, folks. You got to learn how to contain them. So even here, let's say if you jumped in right away, really not the right idea, because we do expect the first test to be the best test. Even if you were to jump in and take a small loss there, you hear it from me all the time. The more it nips that level and a shorter concentration, that actually promotes an entry for me. So over time, this led to the higher high. It just cleared up higher. Next 50-cent level, whole number. This being a 50-cent level, obviously, 450. So again, I don't have the book map up until 10:25, 10:30 yesterday. I'll show it in just a bit, but basically that takes us to here. Let me ask us really quickly, what time do we expect reversals to happen for a lot of these stocks that we call out? Market opens at 9:30. When do we expect reversals to happen normally? And in between, let me answer a question from Rod asking, what are your thoughts on trailing stops? I personally don't use them with day trading, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. Doesn't mean it's incorrect. If you trained yourself from the get-go with trailing stops and you're very quick to set them up or move them around, then I would never be one to tell you to change your habits. Now, if you're using a trailing stop and you're getting stopped out more often than you should be, and the stock's moving up without you after, that's where I'd say we probably can work a little bit better as far as where to place that stop at first, how offset it should be from where the price is at. Things like that we can kind of focus on there. But I think it's a great tool. Now, all of us answering otherwise, 10:15, 10:30, right? So, all right, well, for as much as it pumped up even from pre-market, we're getting close to 10:15, 10:30. It broke above 450, but we got to keep seeing resistance turn into support. Otherwise, if we get a lower low, then I'd like to think this thing is just going to collapse. So easy to say, there was no real lower low once it rebroke over 450 here. It just took off, right? It completely exploded. Now, I do want to just jump really quick before I show the book map. Let's at least now look at the daily chart because, hey, once it goes from 3 to 350, 350 to 4, it's like a hell of a move. You might be asking like, all right, well, let's look back on the long-term chart. Where could we find any glimpse of a historical level? And again, I'm doing this kind of, looking at like what happened prior to yesterday's run. Well, you got a bunch of these long upwicks here on these daily candles. They're not all matching up perfectly. One, basically two right there. And it was holding it slightly well here. What is that, 694? All right, let's just at least use that at first. Obviously, we know it pushed up much higher over time, much, much higher. So, over time, that's where you could look at your next potential historical level, maybe around 10 here. It's not perfect, around 10. Then up top, like seemingly you have a resistance around like 15, 16-ish, a little resistance there. It held it pretty nicely as a little dip point here back in April of last year. I think this was April of this year. Wow, this thing has been through the spin cycle over the last year. Wow, from like 30 or 25-ish all the way down to like $1. So, eventually a stock like this will have its, every dog will have its day. Every dog will have its bone. I guess that's the phrase. This will eventually make a short squeeze over time, but you don't want to hold your breath waiting for that, of course. Obviously, once we saw it pop in pre-market, you could begin to spin the gears a bit and ask yourself, what if? So at least let's just use this price at first, relatively right around 694, $7. We know it broke higher, obviously, but how did that price play out as a potential historical? 694-ish, 7-ish. Not terrible, folks. Not terrible at all. This is pretty damn nice to me, actually. Again, I told it to you right away in the beginning. I didn't take a single trade on this myself. I didn't plot levels on this. And the more it ran up, you could try and improvise here and there. But I barely remember what I had for breakfast this morning, let alone the levels for a stock I didn't even trade. So it just really goes to tell you, looking back on the long-term chart, yes, it broke over 694 and $7 over time here, but This was holding as a little base. Yes, it broke under it, but even here, it's not perfect. But you had a couple of these candles where it was holding pretty cleanly. Could you say the same with like these two tops? I don't see like something that's holding well as a base here. Like it dips a little down there, but talk about continuity. Talk about at least how often a price is holding on the long-term chart over time here. It's not flawless or perfect, but at least for me, I thought that was strong enough at the time. And that was just a raw reaction right there. I could have had a little egg in my face with this, but it goes to show it blasted above this as resistance. And I want all of us to answer this question for me. I know you know this, especially if you've been here any longer than a week and are watching traders talk routinely. You know how to answer this question. When a stock breaks above resistance and it runs off of it, we'd like to think that resistance should become what, folks? Every one of us should be answering this right away. It's a one-letter answer. Or if you're Ray or someone else wants to give the full word, of course, support, absolutely. Support S. And right here, it's easy to say in hindsight, but boy, did this hold as support. And then it led to the next move up. Now, again, really quick, I'm kind of going in depth on this trade. Let's break open Bookmap now. This is from yesterday, but like only beginning from 10:25 in the morning. So, basically it's to say, obviously this kept pushing up. There wasn't really an iceberg at $7 or $6.94 right there. So clearly that long-term chart level was the reason why this held so nicely. You got the VWAP here, seems like here mixed in. But otherwise, this next level is more compelling. So we happen to have an iceberg at $8. Now, it's about 20,000 shares. In relation to some of these big print levels here, that's not that much, to be transparent with you. But what I like about this 8 level later on is that, well, there was an iceberg here. And over time, there's a new one that showed up. Not as big, but the more that we keep seeing continuity at one price, in this case here, we see two separate orange lines at the same exact price. All right, well, this is making me trust the $8 price level a lot more. So that's where I could start to say, what happens if this keeps nipping and gnawing over 8? It's the first test of this as resistance, this orange line. It's not the first test of it as a level, but it's the first test of this orange line. First test, best test, it popped and dropped. Well, it still shook around it a little bit after heading into late morning time. But point being is that the more it stabs and gnaws and breaks over that level, you should be getting your more conclusive, decisive reaction after. So easy to say in hindsight, but thankfully, perhaps if you took a small loss here or two, right? This is an area where I could see myself getting, in a small loss in and out. It's not making that big pop right away. All right, break even. Or, it's not making that big move right. All right, -7. Well, if you're still watching the trade and or have faith in the level that you're looking at, it took a few more minutes, but the next break above this line, that's your sling. And it ended up making to the next run up, right? So the issue is on a trade like this, the more it goes up, it's easy to go over this after the fact, right? And, it's easier to go over it after the fact, especially once the picture's already completed here. But in the heat of the moment, it is still very difficult to apply this the more and more it goes up. How often do we see a stock up 500% or 300%? I mean, maybe once a week, you're right, but it's just to say once a week, once every other week. All right, well, the more that you trade a stock like this, you will become more confident with reacting with entries and exits and setting stops. But still, though, when a stock is up 300%, then 500%, 700%, we're not always going to feel that same level of confidence that we had when it was only up 30%. We know that big trees fall hard here, right? So so in the afternoon yesterday, I didn't put this on our watch list because it was already done. It was already tanking at that point. But I wrote to you folks in the chat, Sydney, Kathleen, Barbara, Ray. I said, I think a couple of us were trying to call it out at 3 o'clock. I was like, guys, I see this moving lower. I think this is going to like 675 by, the close today or like by after hours. Well, why 675? I mean, we know what goes up comes back down twice as fast, but This is at $10 here going into the afternoon, right? There's still a chance for this to build a higher low and make a higher high. Well, yeah, but the last major support level that it was holding was basically that, it was that historical level that we said. It was like 690-ish right there, like basically this. That's what I was kind of using. I was using this as like my base to say, listen, this is not moving up any higher today. It already ran up too much. So, if you decide to trade this going into the afternoon, hey, I shoot straight. I tell it how it is. If you don't want to accept this, that's on you. If you're trading this stock as it's flat after already made a 500% move up and down, you are a gambler. Simple as that. Now, if you're doing it on like 100 shares, it's like small, tiny size. All right, you're not gambling as much as you're just trying to poke at something, trying to toss a dart on the wall and hope it lands. But if you're doing this on 500 shares, like real size, or a hell of a lot more than that at times, that's absolutely gambling here, and over time, well, I was right with the fact that, yeah, this came right back down towards that 680-ish, 690-ish level, and even lower now, right? What goes up comes back down. What goes up comes back down here. What goes up comes back down here too on BYU. I can go through the whole shebang here, folks. PXMD from earlier today. What goes up comes back down. This is going to break much lower heading into the afternoon today is my guess. If I'm wrong with that, then the less often move will happen than if I'm wrong there. Because eventually this is going to exhaust out again. Maybe it tries to move back up here, and then it's going to have a head fake, and then it's going to crap out and probably break lower towards like 450 a share. That's just what happens more often than not. So, these trades are great for the morning. They're great for while they're showing higher lows. Again, though, the more it goes up percentage-wise, you start to become more skittish on it. Like, it's really not worth the time. Eventually, it's going to tank. Well, look what happened here, right? Obviously, same thing. Let's go into this trade quickly. I did want to save some time to go into PXMD. Obviously, we had such a move yesterday on that Life W. The one thing that I like about that, after we get such a good move on Life W, from yesterday, once we get like one 500% gainer out there, you should feel a little hopeful. Like eventually you're going to see another one pop up pretty soon. You start to get the crazies out there that try and pump up the next uber low float stock. And obviously it'll make the same dump off like this one made. But heading into this morning here, PXMD, geez, like right at, what was it, 8 o'clock? 8:30? 8:15? 8:26 here, right before 8:30 and right before I logged in. This thing just made a big pop, right? So let me check the news out on this. I forgot the news out on this company. We don't really care too much when we're looking to trade the momentum really more than anything in the significant orders that are out there. If a stock is pumping off and no news, I'm not chomping at the bit to take it, but I'm not not taking it. If it looks good in terms of volume, I'll consider it. So what was the news out on the stock, PXMD? So Pax Medica announces publication of autism spectrum disorder phase 2 study results. All right, well, phase 2 definitely we know is to be fairly significant, along the way of FDA approval. They still got a long road to go, but better than phase 1. And if they're passing their primary and secondary endpoints with it's a nice pop and it's a good reaction. You should expect a clean move on this stock. So of course it broke out right away. Now, hey, again, in pre-market, it actually had a pretty thin book. So you had to be very careful on a trade like this. So right away, you could just kind of lean towards whole number prices and 50-cent prices too. So $5, $4.50, like we said, that became the base here. $6, is your next whole number ahead, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I will say this area here, just as like a chart area, seems to be holding pretty nicely. It's not exactly at 6, but it's like maybe around 566, 580-ish. Even that is not really a very specific price or range. It's pretty abstract. So that's where I could break open Bookmap here and say, well, where were the orders? Were there any large orders out here for Bookmap level 4 on PXMD? If you're looking to follow this stock for 9:30 for the opening bell, you got to figure out where the iceberg orders are and where the big levels are here. So that's where I could tell you it looks like there's some volume that got filled at $5. There's some volume that got filled a little bit at like 560-ish, and it's some good bid volume too. So you know what? I would say right here at like 560-ish, maybe even a little higher, you could probably go probably 569. Looking at the delta column here, the green. So that's actually where I'm going to look to focus on. 569 we'll go with. So it looks like we had a lot more buying than selling there. Now, the more times that we keep seeing this press up against 569 here, and certainly, of course, easy to say, but when the market opened up, well, that's where you want to anticipate your potential what if. So this is pre-market. That's what it was. Basically right there. It's giving me a tough time. So you know what? It ended up kissing it, pressing up against it. It pushed up against it here. And the more times it does that, I should expect a more decisive move after. But it does look like it was still shaking around, given a hell of a tough time with trying to move up off of it, make the better move from it. Well, it eventually does. So that's easy to say. Well, it's the same concept that you want to focus on. It punched above this resistance and it ran off of it. It moved up like nearly, or moved up over $1, from this price. So when a stock breaks above resistance and it runs off of it, I'd like to think that resistance should look to become support. And, it's easy to say that looking at what happens here, but this was the first major resistance from pre-market. It was chippy around it. And that I think I'll attribute just to the light liquidity, very small orders out there on level 3, at least across the board. So that's what makes it a little bit more difficult to anticipate a cleaner level to hold. There's really not much volume to represent that price. So you're hoping for this to make the cleaner move, but it still had a tough time before it launched higher. Well, hey, that's where you use that price then as support later on. So easy to say. Yeah, it did hold above that price going into the open. But what happened after? Was there any other level that we could have focused on? We know that it popped and broke out right away. So what I'll do is look to focus on a couple levels here. I'm plotting a price right at here. Pretty similar. We had a lot of buying, a lot of green that came in roughly around 635. You can go a little higher here, like 648 right here. I'm just going to use this line for right now, though. This one, the larger green spike on the delta. So that was at 635, right? So let's just use that at first. We know that it breaks out right away, but you know what's funny? Look at this. What do you know? It moves up actually at first. It breaks over the level and pulls back. Clean, moves back up to it, it holds the level, clean, and then on the next break above it, it ends up getting halted. So I'll tell you what, that was actually a very clean level that we had, and it was all because of level 4. We had a bunch of volume, a bunch of buying, a hell of a lot more buying than selling right here at this price, looking at the delta column, right? So 636, 635. Well, hey, zoomed in when the market opened up. We know it broke out right away or shortly after the open, but, this held pretty well at first. The more times it pushes up against it, the more times it nips and gnaws at it, we should expect that cleaner reaction. And by cleaner reaction, hell, this can make a pop and drop, and I'd call that a clean reaction as long as it just utterly tanks after. A clean reaction could be a reversal too. We want the pop. We want the breakout. So, you just got to anticipate what happens if it fails to give you that move that you want. But obviously, it ended up popping at first, broke out right away, and got halted. That happened within the first 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So, hey, PXMD, I did not trade myself today. I was too preoccupied with the SPY, with AMD, with DraftKings, all monsters today. Well, even if I was dialed in on this stock going into the market open, this popped right away at 9:30. So, or 9:32. So I would not sit here and tell you, oh, everyone should have just jumped in right there. If it happened after the first 5 minutes, absolutely. I would be head on about that. I would say, yeah, 9:37, it breaks over that level. Everyone should jump in right there. That's not the case. This pops within the first 2 minutes, gets halted. So, if you were sitting on your hands at first, that's the right call. You made the right decision, because more often than not, if you do decide to jump into a trade within the first minute or two, you're still going to see a lot of shakes. And if you don't get that trend that you want, you got to be prepared, because it's going to make a big shakedown. So yes, it popped right away. Now, how do you react to a stock that gets halted? Well, we cover that here in Traders Talk briefly. I talk about this a lot further in class in the Phase 2 stock course. When a stock gets halted off of volatility, we typically have 5 or 10 minutes, depending on the variation, to see it reopen. For all of my returning students here, typical members inside our live trading room, daily members, might I say, and students that have been with me for a little while that are taking the gold stock course, majority of us here. When a stock reopens from a halt, can you tell me what's one of the most important things that I focus on right after a stock reopens from a halt? Like immediately after the stock reopens, what should we be focused on? There should be something very specific that you should be answering here. Bill and Sid and Brad all saying the same thing. And to elaborate on that, they are saying the opening halt print. When this ended up reopening from its first halt, well, much like we see at 9:30 in the morning, much like we see at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, we're going to see a big dot pop up, and this in its own becomes a massive level to watch on this trade. Pain in the ass part is that for a stock that gets halted over and over and over and over and over again without any thought of allowing us to trade it, well, you got to focus in on all these little dots that may be popping up here. So let me actually refilter this. There we go, a little bit better there. So it ended up getting reopened up at the price 718. It popped up pretty quickly after and got halted at like 837. Well, when it reopened up from that halt, we had this new dot come in. It says 80,241 shares at $9. So, hey, when we're looking for iceberg orders out there and, there isn't anything really larger than 10 or 12,000 out there, well, this becomes a massive level too. So you have 80,000 shares. It's filled exactly at $9. And then you had this price as well, 133,000 shares at 718. Let's just stop right there. I'm just going to plot a couple lines here and see how this played out. So it looks like this didn't come back down to the 718 price until here. So right here, came down to it, got about 8 cents shy, hit a low of 726. So it didn't technically go to test this as support yet. Well, of course it did right here, and you are looking for a clean under and over. If it breaks under and just ends up staying under, or if it does go under and over, which Kathleen, I will get to your question just a little bit on this. Kath sent in a great question to me last night on under and overs, and I'm going to do that next. But hey, if this goes under and then breaks back over and you're trying to look for that bounce, hey, let me ask us here. Perhaps there are students like Sydney, Brad, Bill, Margaret, Rod, Barbara. Definitely, I got to get you to answer this one more time for me. When a stock breaks through a big level, what are we getting shortly after, folks? I said it 1,000 times already here in this Traders Talk, but it came off a coaching call from one of our students. I was asking her, going through the same ones and twos with her as I do in Traders Talk, but obviously all of us, including Barbara, saying big move shortly after. Yeah, we got a big move shortly after. That's for sure. This did not hold support after. It broke under. It broke over, but then it pulled right back under again. And then that's where you say, all right, well, clearly this is not making that reaction that you want it to make. So, it ended up immediately failing. And I got halted again on the way down too. So that was the 718 price. How about the 9? How about the 9? Did 9 act as a great level after? You'd want it to. It reopened up here. It popped up. It came back down. And then that's where you could say, okay, well, hey, if it can break under, then back over, then you have a very good trade. It breaks under, it stays under, and it gets halted on the way down shortly after too. So, you'd want this to hold as support, or maybe later on, if it does push back above 9 here, obviously before it drops lower here, what if it does solidify at 8, goes back up, and starts nipping at that 9 level? Well, I would be using that 9 level for a potential breakout should that have been the case. The more times this nips at 9 over time here, like it broke under it, I would expect support to become resistance. So that's what happened. on the first actual test of this as resistance, which it didn't even make, it was so weak it just broke lower. The first actual test of 9 as resistance, you got to expect that to hold. But if it were to nip and gnaw, keep pushing up against there over time and then pops it, that would lead to a great entry. Such is not the case here, folks. It's easy to say. It just doesn't even get back up to 9. Comes close, but no cigar. Comes back down. All right, so really quick, I got to run through a bunch of questions that came in from before because we're running on thin time here. So from Damon, one of our new trial members here, actually. So I appreciate Damon and all of our new members just joining us here. Let me get to Damon's question first, actually, and we'll kind of go from bottom to top, rather. Actually, it might not be a question, maybe just a statement, comment. Damon saying, trading a stock the first 5 minutes of the opening can be very profitable depending on where you put your risk management, stop loss, and have plotted your entry and profit point and exit. Well, you got to say that on every trade, though. No trade at any time of the day will work out if you don't have that well established, right? So, when I teach phase 1 and phase 2 of our stock course, if you become a student, go through our classes, you will definitely understand. I try and make that the biggest point possible. It's all about preparation. Now, just from my experience doing this with Fausto, I've been with Fausto for 10 years practically at this point. Fausto has been doing this for 35 years. We're not trading the first 5 minutes. We're sitting on our hands, Damon. That's the rule. So maybe like 1% of the time, perhaps. Maybe out of 100 trades, maybe 1 out of 100 I would look to take within the first 5. But it's because I would have to be overtly confident, supremely confident of the move. But I'd rather see just a tiny bit more play out. Now, to add on top of what Damon did say, though, you don't want to wait much further than the first 5 minutes there because, just like we asked earlier, all of our students wrote back so fast. Reversal time's around 10:15, 10:30. So if you're starting to take a trade at 9:50 in the morning, 10 o'clock, your window is pretty small already, right? You do want to have a larger window of opportunity to anticipate trend and momentum. So we are as adamant as we are to say, wait the first 5 minutes. We are as adamant to say the 5 minutes after that, we should be jumping into a trade. We should be getting into something. So very good comment. I like that, though, Damon. It sounds like you have a lot of experience with day trading in particular before coming to us, which honestly, not everyone has a wealth of day trading experience before joining CTU. So, hey, I love when new students come in with that type of experience, one step ahead of the curve, perhaps. And, that's a great point that I emphasize in class, just the whole preparation point, really. All right, so I'm going from bottom to top in our chat board right now. So my apologies here. I did get to Rod's question just before about trailing stops. I don't think I skipped anyone there. Good. All right, so I do have to get to Kathleen's question. She had sent that through email, and I think Pablo sent over his questions through email also on options. So I want to get to those for sure. All right, under and over. Let's just kind of dig into under and over. And Kathleen had a question in particular with this. It was I think it was basically, how do you define a good opportunity? Like, what makes a stock a good under and over? Verbatim, she wrote, how do you find the stocks to look at for an under and over? Well, the way that what makes me feel, okay, so the best way I answer that question, Kathleen, is I'm going to rephrase that question. What makes me feel most confident about support holding? That's just how I'm going to rephrase the question, because I'm not going to look for an under and over if I don't feel confident in support holding. What makes me feel confident in support holding? Well, a strong break over major resistance and a run over that level, because just like we've been teaching here, simple support resistance principle. But when a stock breaks above major resistance and it runs off of it, it's because we're seeing an overwhelming amount of buying interest to squeeze over that price. So if we're expecting support to hold, then we should be expecting the buyers to contain the stock above that interest, above where they bought. So that's where ideally I'd want to see the stock make that quicker bounce once that price gets tested. But even for myself, I'll wait to see the stock nip under that level first. Because hell, if support gets broken through right away and the stock just keeps dropping off, then there's zero entry. I need to see the under and then the break back over. And I know Kathleen's understanding of the whole concept of under and over. She's been with us for a bit and here every week with Traders Talk. I love when she sends in questions. I wrote that to her earlier last night too, because it goes to show the folks that are with us here for months and years on end, goes to show they are putting an effort in to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And you're not going to understand if you don't ask and if you're not curious. So I love when Kathleen sends in her questions. So I know she understands the whole concept of under and over, but for everyone else, I prefer to see a stock nip under that big level first as support, because my best entries to buy a stock are directly after it breaks through a big level on the way up. So how about this? I'm going to knock out 2 questions with 1 stone. How about this? Pablo, you're next here. All right. So we talked about this a little bit in phase 2 when we spoke about historical charting and with charting the market. So killing 2 birds with 1 stone. We're going to answer Kathleen. We're going to answer Pablo both. So today is Tuesday. This candle here where my cursor is Monday's daily candle. This candle here is Friday's candle, right? Now, we emphasize the close price of a lot of these daily candles, at least the most recent day, seeing the closing bell print, the close price of the previous day. Well, you also want to look at the close price of the previous week that just finished up. So this was from Friday, November 3rd, the SPY S&P ETF here. The close price, right? Close price. What does that say? 434.69, right? All see that there? Close 434.69. Now, yesterday I was looking for that to be a level. Never got touched. Okay, that's fine. But today, that was a level. Basically, that's the line right there, 2 pennies off. So I saw the market move up early this morning, Kath. It was moving off of it, right? And I am bullish on the market as a whole. I think that we're going to see a melt up heading into the end of this year. I said this a month ago. So for anyone new, obviously this week that we've had, I was very well ready for this week and a lot of what's to come. But I was ready for that week, a week before that. And I took a couple losses on some SPY calls prior to last week. So, not all perfect, but it is to say I'm remaining bullish. So if I'm expecting if I'm expecting a move up and the SPY is moving off this level here, we'll call it as resistance. It had a tough time breaking above it. Well, I'd like to think by the time the market opens up, we could see this potentially hold at this price. Has to go under and over, and then we have to get that big move shortly after. So what's easy to tell you is that we got that move. It broke under and over, and we ended up getting that cleaner reaction. There was one pullback here. I was thinking, oh, shoot, what if it comes back down? We get lower high and lower low. The more times this gets poked at as a support level, then I'd like to think there's a case to see a real lower low. So you got to be careful the more that it gets tested. But it's simply to say, Kat, the reason why I was focused in on the under and over here is because I'm bullish just on this as a whole. So I'm looking for that move up. I wouldn't look for a bounce on a stock I'm bearish on, right? And I know Kathleen knows this. I'm just answering that for everyone. But it's to say, though, that, if that was such a big level, then at least for the first test of this as support during the regular session, at least this is pre-market earlier in the morning. So you could count that, but this is the first real actual test of this price during the regular trading hours this week. First test is the best test, right? So that's where I was focused in around for the bounce there. Now, let me just answer Pablo really quickly here, because it definitely translates right to Pablo's question. So could you share your latest option trade on SPY or AMD? Bingo bango right there. I ended up taking 435 calls on this one, Pablo. One thing I could say is that a lot of traders, and myself included, I do this. It's just you got to do it responsibly. With options trading, especially on SPY, you got the 0 days till expiration contracts now. Those are very high risk. Those are highly volatile. Getting a bounce early in the morning is going to play to your favor a hell of a lot better than a bounce in the afternoon could. So thankfully for me here, we had a nice bounce here early in the morning where I said, okay, cyber clock is on our time. And I took the 0 DTE on this one at 435. But I went under and over from the close price back from Friday this past week. And that's what led me to take that initial trade. All right. That was just the SPY there, at least. And I think Pablo may have had one more question there if I see it come in, Pablo. Maybe I got to check private chat here. Give me a quick moment. Oh, yeah, this was it. Okay, so you can send it through email just from chat. I'm caching it, though, here. So in relation to his question on AMD, was 111.90 the opening print for AMD a good place to enter? Sounds like a good place to enter because typically the opening print would be a pretty significant level, right? Significant size here right at 930. So my answer instantly is I'd imagine it to be. Now, historically, the close prices, the close will have bigger volume than the open. So it's 156,000 shares filled. It's technically at 111.88. Hey, let's look at AMD and see where the iceberg orders are for AMD. Well, we got a 142,000 share order sitting up top here on the ask at 115, right? Now, if that's big, 142,000 shares, if we're calling that big resistance, a big level, then how significant should we consider the opening print then? It's larger, right? It's bigger than the iceberg at 115. So definitely we should be factoring this in as a level of some sort. Question is, though, did we have better volume filled, let's say, from the close yesterday, perhaps? Sorry to just kind of poke at this really quickly, if I may. Finagle a couple of things here really briefly, so my apologies. There we go. Yeah, we got a 1.4 million share block print. So, that is going to be a lot more significant in terms of volume. They're very close in price. It's an offset by maybe 12, 13 pennies. But the close price from yesterday, I would put more focal point on. And then you could even say the same from Friday close, the end of last week. What was that? 112.25. So it was actually above. That was 2.5 mil. All right, let's just plot those two levels. And, it's going to be relating more towards the open price, Pablo, because it's easy to say that it broke out higher either way. There we go. That's the closing bell print from Friday last week. The opening print, the price that you're focused on was the opening bell print from today. That was basically at 111.88. We'll just call it that. Shook under it first. Under it. So once it breaks under it and drops, support should become resistance. It was. Came back down. Now it moves up here. It makes a head fake clearly, which is easy to say after the fact. But what you could at least point to is to say, well, it did break over it. And we definitely had some interest there at first. What if it keeps breaking over it? What if? That's what we have to ask ourselves. Because for anyone that doesn't ask that question and they think that they know what's going to happen ahead, you're not going to get far. So we have to put ourselves in the shoes of like a 6-year-old. Why? What if? Right? So, why did we see so much buying here? What if we continue to see more buying here? Thankfully, we did. Led to the re-break. And then that's what led to a clean entry. If you wanted to wait for the closing bell print from Friday last week, the 112.25, seemingly that led to a great entry as well. Just took a shake above it at first, then the re-break, and off and running it went. All right, so from Matt, one of our new trial members here, also asking, what is meant by laddering and what is the significance? Really good question, and I could even answer this one using the SPY. How about this? I normally can't use like an ETF to answer this question. So this is really cool. It's actually really rare that we're seeing this happen. So do not look to focus on this too often because it took me by surprise. Everybody see the orange and red line here where my cursor is? It's only there for a short time. It's not there for a long time. It's there for a good time though, right? So it's to say that this is an order on the bid. And actually, again, you don't see this price action play out so cleanly on the heat map for an ETF like the SPY. So when I see something like this pop up, I'll instantly say, okay, well, that's support. This is the SPY moving up. This is support. It's under it. Well, the order got pulled. That's not good, at least in the immediate term. That's not good. Well, what I noticed was that we ended up seeing a new order get placed. It was a little after the fact. It was about 8 minutes later. A lot of times with a ladder, you'll tend to see it pretty much instantly, where like this order gets pulled and it pops up here like instantly after. There is an 8-minute gap, so you can't call this a ladder right away. You really can't. You don't know. But when this next order pops up higher, well, that's where you could begin to hypothesize and say, ooh, well, it seems like whoever placed the order here could have been the same person here. I can't do a DNA, just to say, it looks like someone is trying to support the ETF here by placing a larger order on the buy side. And the more and more and more of that we see over time, we tend to see the stock, or we tend to see the ticker continue to move up. So even here, it was another like 20 minutes later, but you could actually see more prominently a new bid pop up at 436.26. And pretty shortly after it popped up, it allowed the SPY to continue to move up into the sell order here. And then obviously the market was strong enough to see continuation. But this is a ladder where you tend to see a very clear push on a symbol ticker because of an iceberg. And even this ladder is a little bit more long or drawn out. You tend to see ladders play out in a really short concentration. Like within just milliseconds, you'll tend to see the new order pop up. So. All right. So, hey, folks, I think that we're going to finish up here in just a little bit. I got to do my due diligence, though, just make sure I go through all my emails here just to make sure I didn't skip over anyone. I think I may have gotten give me a sec here. Pardon me. Actually, there's a group of emails. I don't know if they're question related, but give me a quick second here. I'll try and zip through these here if I can. Had a trader, Rosalie, here joining us, asking just for more views on NVIDIA. My views on NVIDIA are very in line with my views on AMD. I'm very bullish on AMD. I'm very bullish on the market altogether. NVIDIA earnings are in 2 weeks, so just be on the lookout for that. I'd say that's going to be your bigger talking point. I'll tell you, NVIDIA earnings are really going to affect the market. I think NVIDIA has more potential to move the market compared to like a Microsoft, Apple. So, November 21st, I think, is their earnings. All right. Email from an undisclosed trader. I am not going to repeat their name because I just want their email to be more private. So won't name the trader that had sent me this email. But they had said, "Hi Josh, I have not been trading. I have not been trading for almost 10 years. Why? I lost almost 200,000 in the financial crisis and another 100,000 in 2014 when oil collapsed. Please teach me how I could recuperate some of these losses." Right. And, hey, a lot of us have been there to some degree, maybe not to, 300,000 total, maybe, but in the sense of just, let's say, losing a large percentage of your portfolio or account. I think a lot of us here have been there, right? I've been there with crypto. Got my ass handed to me the last 2 cycles. I'm bullish on it long term, but obviously when you get such a big drawdown, it stinks losing 70%, right? Now, with that, one thing that Matt brings up here, one of our new members, I love this advice. He says, no revenge trading. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, that's easy to say, though, right, Matt? Easy to say in a group discussion here. Now, the part that I wanted to elaborate on with that, at least, is the question or the statement should not be, please teach me how I could recuperate some of these losses. It should be, please teach me how I can contain emotion, and please teach me how I could follow a list of instructions step by step. Hey, again, it's the IKEA example. You go to, IKEA, if you got to build the furniture yourself, let's just say, it comes with an instruction booklet. Well, our instruction booklet, unfortunately, with the market is not exactly as cut and dry as just looking at step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. this trade AMD flew at the market open. If we are not quick to react and we're just kind of reading off a piece of paper and we're going to let the whole market pass us by. We have to learn how to react to patterns that we've seen play out in the past. So that's where I could tell you, at least from our classes, from this Traders Talk workshop, certainly I hope that you've gained a lot of information already. But the more that you're here with us, you learn to gain the confidence of how to react to this all. Each and every week, I go through the relatively the same motions, right? Each and every week here. That's where you see students like Brad, Kathleen, John, Bill, certainly Phil, and a bunch more of us, answer a lot of these questions pretty quickly at this point. It's because they've been asked these questions a lot to where they have it in their head already. It's very quick for them to react to these questions. And certainly my goal as an instructor is to have you react without me, over your shoulder, without us in Traders Talk here, as you're about to trade 1,000 shares of whatever stock it may be, to risk a lot of money for you to at least have the confidence to say, okay, that's what I remember last week in Traders Talk. Okay. Under and over, right? Under and over. Oh, he gets in right away. Okay. Let's look for a big move shortly after. Let me ask us really quickly, my new catchphrase before you start driving on the expressway, before you pull out of your driveway, folks. What are you doing in your car? What are you doing in your car before pulling out the old driveway? Bill says, and everyone else should be saying, put your seatbelt on, right? Absolutely. Well, hey, after I get in, you got to set your stop. You got to set a very conservative stop, especially as a day trade, because if we are expecting a big reaction after we jump in, as much as I want that reaction to be in a certain direction, if I don't get that reaction in one direction, I guarantee you we're going to get a reaction in the other direction. So that's where you got to put your seatbelt on no matter what, right? So, it's a lot of these catchphrases and quotes or, hey, Traders Talk, we go through the same motions pretty much every week. Well, the more that you're going through these motions with me, the goal is for you to go through these motions on your own as there is money on the line. All right, folks. So, hey, we are going to finish up for right now. I hope you all enjoyed. But hey, we'll be back on later on today, this afternoon, myself at 2:30 Eastern for the afternoon meeting. Normally, this is garbage time. Normally, this is where things should not be moving nearly as well. So looking at the SPY right now, little pullback. There might be one or two stocks making a small little push here or there, but I'm going to sit on my hands really up until like 2:33, and then we'll reconvene later on this afternoon, folks. All right. So hey, for all of us here collectively on social media, be a friend, tell a friend. Just make sure that you're subscribed and up to date on all of our social media streams at Cyber Trading View. But otherwise, if you're interested in joining our live trading room, at least inside the Cyber Group room here with Bill, Kathleen, John, all of our students, at least, just make sure that you go to that QR code on the top left of your stream. If you're fancy with your phone, you can break out the camera, scan it, get you access to a week-long trial with us here. Otherwise, though, you can go right down to the link on the green banner below. Let's say if you're not as fancy with your phone, just go right down to the bottom of the stream right there in the green banner right there, ctu.co/trial, and get you access as well. But hey, folks, we'll be back later on today. Oh, I got a couple call outs here. Whoa, before we finish up. Kathleen saying PCT popped. Moved up a tiny amount, but not really trading like big volumes. So I'd want to see more out of that. This NVOS is making a nice little pop. It looks like it maybe is trying to make a dead cat bounce from yesterday. Big drop yesterday. So this could be more up our alley, but if this fails to make that cleaner higher, if this fails to hold a higher low, that's where you got to be really careful. So we'll keep an eye on this NVOS perhaps. All right, folks. All right, we'll be back on later on today. Everyone, take care.